This is a MARii podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of MARii Mobility World. We're part of the Plug-in with MARii network. I'm Azara Tagaya, your host for this show. And as always on this podcast, we talk about the latest trends in technology and also Malaysia's industries. So today we have a very interesting topic. We want to take a look at the automotive ecosystem and perhaps discuss how can we move forward towards a more environmentally friendly auto ecosystem. So what's the auto industry like at the moment in terms of safety and also the environment? And to help shed some light on this topic today, we have Senior Manager, Strategy and Policy Development at MARii, Malaysia Automotive Robotics and IoT Institute, or MARii, technologist Siti Maisara Muhammad Pizal. Hi, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hi, thank you for inviting us for today's discussion.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Okay, so talking about the environment and also the auto industry, often when we talk about the auto industry, a common theme that always pops up is, of course, sustainability and how we can make the auto environment safer for the consumer, for the business, as well as for the environment as well. But first things first, what would you say is the state of the auto industry at the moment in terms of it being safe for the consumer and also the environment?
Okay, for that question, actually in Malaysia, for sustainability is quite, we are going forward for the policy NAP 2020. It's a bit challenges for us as the ecosystem is not yet been integrated between manufacturing and also aftermarket towards the cradle-to-cradle concept. That's the first point. The second point towards that, for the industry automotive, especially for industry automotive, we are targeting until 2030 is 70% recyclability. That is very challenges because the bridging between aftermarket sector and also manufacturing sector is quite not clear, but we have a lot of standard to make sure that the bridging is more smooth, to make sure the targeted is achieved.
Okay, so when looking up on this topic of being safe for the environment and also a lot of the work that MARii is doing for that, we've come across this term a lot, which is remanufacturing. Can you tell us more about what remanufacturing actually is?
Right. As now, we have a lot of term of R. As we know, we have 11 R that we benchmark across of worldwide. What we adapt for Malaysia is 4R. That means reuse, recycle, repair, and also remanufacturing. This 4R is very important to make sure that bridge between manufacturing and also aftermarket sector is clear. For the remanufacturing, we need to understand the definition. The definition is good as new, based on manual, OEM, or industry requirement that been approved, been gazetted, and to make sure that the core, that's mean the used part, to adopt and adapt with the 7 step of remanufacturing. That's called remanufacturing.
Okay, so can all parts or components be remanufactured?
No. This one to make clear, because the remanufacturing is not including the safety part. That means the safety part, for example, tire, airbag, and so on. That one is cannot be used. That means they cannot become a core. Core, that means a used part, and we cannot do the remanufacturing part for the safety part. That is number one. For others part that can value add, for example, engine is not 100% wear and tear, maybe just a plastic part, maybe 20% is a wear and tear, but most of the engine parts, or we call child part, that can do a remanufacturing part. I give example like US, they have one of association, they are very active for the remanufacturing. They adopt the engine, the petrol engine, and they are doing a process remanufacturing become a hybrid engine. That's what we call a value add.
Okay. Can you tell us more about the process that you explained just now? What is the standardized process that usually takes place in remanufacturing?
Right. For remanufacturing, we have a standard, Malaysia standard, that we adapt from others country. It's called Malaysia Standard for R 2367 2018. They're the code. Under the Malaysia Standard, we have a general step. That's mean first you need to do a core management. That's mean the used part you need to have a sorting and then inventory from others you are collect. For example, I give example, this process, you get one vehicle, one car, but you need to dismantle the core and identify which one is you can do a value add for the core, for the used part. And second, for dismantling of the parts and component, for example, one engine, you need to dismantle one by one and then segregate it, clean it, and then you can do a machinery or polishing from the parts, from the child parts, and then you do the inspection or testing. That means you can identify which part you can replace with new, which part you can repair, which part you can use, and then also which part you can do a recycle. All right, then you assemble back the parts and component, you do a painting or polishing, and then the very important of this step is a supply mark or labeling. The supply mark, we want to make sure that between new part and remanufacturing part, you need to identify this is a supply mark. You need to emboss with at the part. For example, ABC's number heart, remanufacturing by ABC's number heart. And then, of course, the final testing and test inspection. You need to understand. You need to make sure that parts is testing good as new based on the spec or manual that been identified.
Okay. So what you just explained just now, is it the same as the 4R2S standard that is the first, as I understand, Malaysia is the first country in the world to adopt this standard. So can you tell us more about that and how we actually came to that?
All right. Because in our policy, we have 4 version, National Automotive policy. We have 4 version, first version, second version, and third version. The third version we have identified regarding for the remanufacturing, or we call the closed loop for another part, remanufacturing, and also ELV, end of life. That part is to make sure that our system or our industry is closed loop, cradle to cradle. That parts we have benchmark Japan. They have industry standard actually. The industry standard called PAS, PAS 777. This one is driven by industry. When we go there, we learn know-how from their industry, and then we try to adopt with our Malaysian way. But the Malaysian way, we find out that our industry is not follow any industry standard. They just have their own SOP. That's why we come up with government initiative. We come up with a Malaysia standard that belong to government. The first only in world that Malaysia have Malaysia standard for R2S. I give example another from US. As I said, they are very active for remanufacturing. They have their own industry standard. That's why government, Malaysia government, we need to push this initiative to make sure that all industry follow this Malaysia standard. This is the first in the world.
Okay. So how does remanufacturing contribute to the country's gross domestic product? And perhaps you can also give us a forecast for the industry.
Okay. Are we talking about the GDP?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. For the forecast, in policy NAP 2020, the fourth version from National Automotive Policy 2020, we are targeting until 2030 is 10 billion to export. Okay, as current, we are already achieved in 2020 is 1 billion. This one is we get from data from HS code that we analyze, do the analytic. And this targeted by 4 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020 is achieved. But from this perspective, as I said, they are doing a lot of remanufacturing by their own SOP. That's why we are trying to standardize with the Malaysia standard to make sure this Malaysia standard is mandatory under National Remanufacturing Policy. That is another one. It's led by MITI, our ministry. And of course, we want a big industry to become a pilot first, including automotive, marine, locomotive, E&E, and also marine. Okay, from this, we are as a value record as June 2021 is 635 million already. That's why in 2030 we are targeting 10 billion because one of big GDP is contribute is from the aftermarket, or we call after sale sector.
Right. Okay, what about in terms of helping businesses? What is MARii doing to help businesses grow in terms of remanufacturing? Does it help businesses to expand perhaps their services?
Yeah. Right. I give example. One of our industry are doing is getting a core, what we call a used part from. I give example from Japan. They getting the core by doing the vehicle to separate the vehicle. They call half cut. Okay, the half cut they are getting from Japan without doing a proper cleaning. That's why we are pushing this standard to make sure they have cleaning, of course, to protect our environment. From that side, we make sure that the process that I've mentioned before, the 7 step of the process, they do a proper, and then we can push up their core or their remanufacturing parts as a value parts, and then they can sell to others country. Because this area is one of what we do in MARii program. For example, we are transform their manpower because we are touching 4M actually: manpower, machine, material, and also method. Under the 4S Malaysia standard, they include this 4M. The manpower, we transform them to get Sijil Kemahiran Malaysia. This one is under MOHR, Ministry of Human Resource. The agency is JPK, Jabatan Pengguna Kemahiran. We transform them from their experience and then certify them with this certificate. And then for the method and also material, we make sure that they are follow this standard to make sure that our environment is secure. And also the machine. The machine, they need to calibrate. Before this, they are doing their in-house, but from this machine, we have our expertise like certification body in Malaysia, SIRIM, and others to calibrate the machine to make sure that the output is follow the manual.
Okay. So in your experience, what do you think is Malaysia, how is Malaysia doing in the remanufacturing industry? Are we good, or is there some more that can be done? And if so, what do you think can be done to actually improve remanufacturing in Malaysia?
All right. As we are doing this initiative and also this transformation, we identify from our visit and also audit, we find out that we have 11 company already do the remanufacturing, but they don't use the term of remanufacturing. They use a refurbish and so on. But when we found out, they already achieved the step, but the important thing, the supply mark and also the label, because they also get from others customer, they export to America, to Japan also, because we are more on effective for the manpower, because our labor is more effective. And from that perspective, we try to match with this Malaysia standard to make sure that you need to follow, because we don't want end user, that means consumer, to misunderstand about the part, because they don't know this is new, this is remanufacturing, this is used, this is, and so on. Due to that, from these 11 company, we benchmark them, we upgrade them to certify with this Malaysia standard. With others industry like half cut, have that are selling or do a trade for used part and so on. We are transform them bit by bit. Is what we call they are moving with this policy and also this standard. But of course, we need to have a mandatory from ministry, for example, KPD and CP, that Ministry of Consumer, to gazette it to protect the consumer. This is Act under 1999 to make sure that consumer they have their own right to make sure that this part is safe to assemble back for the vehicle. That's very important to make sure that will boost the mindset of the remanufacturing actually.
Okay. In terms of remanufacturing, in your experience and also maybe the research that you've done, perhaps there are misconceptions or myths among the industry players and also consumers. Maybe you can share with us what are some of the misconceptions and how is the government working to counter these false perceptions?
All right. From the National Remanufacturing Policy, as I mentioned, that lead by MARii, we have a lot of scope that we are cater. One of it is the IP. Okay, the intellectual property between manufacturer or the maker and also the aftermarket. That's mean the remanufacturing company. Because we understand that manufacturing is do R&D to make sure one vehicle they have R&D, research and development. The base only will take 1.4 million. Okay, from that perspective, the aftermarket or the remanufacturing company will take the parts from the OEM, from the maker, but we still respect for their IP. That's why between this, what government do with under one of agency under KPDNCP, Ministry of Consumer, is agency MyIPO, to make sure that between this between remanufacturing company and also the maker to have a letter of consent. Because the remanufacturing as now they take a lot of brand, but they are not responsible 100% for the parts that they are doing remanufacturing and so on. That's why letter of consent is very important to make sure the brand is still at the part, on the part, and also to make sure to put remanufacturing by ABC Sdn Bhd and also the warranty. That's very important. Okay, that what is one of initiative that we are trying to streamline between these two sectors.
Okay, so talking more about MARI's role, what is actually MARI's role in encouraging all the stakeholders to implement these standards? Because as you mentioned just now, some of these companies are actually using it, but they're not using the standard practice. So how is MARI encouraging these companies to do that?
Right. One of it, what we are doing with them is a pilot that we're putting cost analysis. For example, once they are certified with this standard, they can do a clear, what we call clear import and export. Because as now, our government side, for example, from custom, some of course is pass, some of course is not. That's why we try to make sure that the SOP is clear to make sure their business is more smooth. And one of it to export back to the customer to make sure this is made in Malaysia. And this is the very what we call clear SOP and until end user. And of course, from perspective of DOE, Department of Environment, they want to know the core they are bringing that is clean. Then we come up with a paper research, of course, together with local academy, local university, to make sure this SOP is clear that once they will bring the core from outside to make sure it's clean, it's not what we call what is definition of clean. Of course, no oil and so on. And this is to make sure that the industry adopt with this process. We are now is a voluntary base because from our side we are pushing to make sure that this is gazetted under each of ministry. For example, KASA, Kementerian Alam Sekitar, MOF, Custom, And of course, MITI is the overall policy. This is to make sure that the outcome or the output from the industry will be smooth, and it will make sure the more benefit in terms of their ROI, return of investment. That means once they are pushing or they are follow this process, the outcome is more better. And of course, one of the initiative that we already do with DOE is we call AATF, Authorized Automotive Treatment Facility. Why we still need import a core, because Malaysia still not gazetted end of life vehicle. That means we don't have any periodic inspection mandatory for private vehicle. It's not include because commercial vehicle already 6 months they need to go to postpartum and so on. For the private vehicle, motorcycle, car is not yet. That's why we are still using the vehicle on the road, and our core is not yet valued. From that perspective, we will take from 2 channels. That means our local core and also import core. That is what we are doing now with them to prove that this will boost their business also.
Indeed, I see. Okay, well, thank you so much, Siti Maisara, for sharing with us. It's been a wonderful discussion and very insightful. Thank you for sharing your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was technologist Siti Maisara Muhammad Rizal, Senior Manager, Strategy and Policy Development at MARii. If you missed any part of today's show, check us, Plug In with MARii on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I'm Azaria Tagaya signing off. See you next time. Bye-bye.
This is a MARii podcast.